Hey there, I'm Rachel Ehring, and you're listening to the Top Music Piano Podcast. Get inspired as we discuss creative resources, trends in piano pedagogy, ways to grow your income and streamline your studio, and new ways to engage your students each week. If you are a teacher who wants to go beyond the method books to create an innovative studio that fosters lifelong music makers, you've come to the right place. Today's episode bridges the gap between composing and teaching beginners. My guest, Jennifer Eklund, shares practical advice for teachers who want to help their students compose music, but we also get into her publishing business and her Piano Pronto method books. Jennifer Eklund holds a bachelor's degree in music with an emphasis in performance and pedagogy and a master's degree in historical musicology from California State University, Long Beach. She's an avid arranger, composer, and author of the Piano Pronto method book series, as well as a wide variety of supplemental songbooks for students of all ages and levels. Here's my interview with Jennifer Eklund. Hi, Jennifer. Welcome to the show. Can you introduce yourself to our listeners and tell us a little bit of your background as a teacher and now as a publisher?
Sure, Rachel. Thanks so much for having me today. I'm glad to be here. My background, well, I've been playing the piano for just about forever, probably like most of the listeners here. I am a native of Orange County, California, and I studied first at Orange Coast College, which is a junior college, and then I transferred over to Cal State Long Beach, where I earned a bachelor's degree in piano performance. And then I took a bunch of years off to write these little method books called Piano Pronto that we're going to talk about later. And then I got an itch to go back to grad school for some reason and ended up back at Cal State Long Beach, but this time for a musicology degree. So I did a bunch of writing of papers and reading way too much. And so then that was enough of that. In terms of teaching, I started very young. I started when I was in high school, actually. I was just a sophomore, and I really had just a strong desire to want to teach kids. And so I started my own little business at age 14 and kind of just kept going. I looked at the calendar the other day. I've actually been retired from teaching now since 2014. So that's 10 years. Part of it is because I started building this little publishing business as a side hustle originally, and then the side hustle ended up turning into my main hustle. And so after 20 years of teaching, I just went full on with the publishing business, and that's what I've been doing ever since.
Great. Wow. I'm so excited to learn more about all of this. So let's start with pianopronto.com, which is your publishing business. Can you tell us a little bit about that and what you want music teachers to know about it?
Sure. I will give you the Reader's Digest version. Of course, you can all just go explore pianopronto.com because there's tons of fun features and you can explore everything that we have to offer. We are a full-scale publishing house. We provide method books, songbooks, sheet music. We do hard copy and we do digital. We have strived to recreate the brick and mortar experience, which unfortunately has sort of disappeared from most towns in this country. Music stores are kind of closing up shop. So we wanted to recreate that experience and also enhance it. So you will find on our website that we have really ample page previews for everything we offer. There's full audio on everything, so you know exactly what you're getting before you buy. I rarely have anyone return anything because we are so transparent with our offerings. So that's something that is really unique to our company. And I feel like it's something that has influenced others in the publishing business. We also represent a gaggle of lovely composers under our Composers Community banner. People like Chrissy Ricker, who's extremely popular with our customers, Lisa Lucas, who's also a fantastic writer, Rick Robertson. We started Composers Community in 2015 because I just felt that there were certain areas, certain genres that just weren't my wheelhouse. And I wanted to sort of bring in some new voices and to just sort of expand the Piano Pronto umbrella. And so I found just sort of through the years, all these people sort of started trickling in, and hence we have Composers Community. So we have really a ton of offerings from them in terms of books and sheet music. The other thing unique about pianopronto.com is our licensing options for all of our books and our sheet music. We offer single-use licenses and then studio licenses, which have become very popular over the years. You pay once and you can use a product for life. And this is really nice because I thought back to my own teaching years when my favorite thing to do was really customize the lesson experience for students. So I wanted to be able to pick and choose from different books. And I didn't necessarily always want to just use a whole book with one student. And so really the studio license option, when you find a piece that you're going to want to use with a lot of students, it's a better value if you get the studio license, and you can use that piece forever, however you like within your studio. So that is something that our customers certainly appreciate. We also allow you to buy a single-use copy and then upgrade to the studio license, and we credit you whatever you paid for the single-use license, which is also nice. So you can sort of try things out before you make that decision to buy a studio license. So that's sort of the Reader's Digest version of what we do and what we offer.
I like that. And I think you're right that teachers are really liking studio licenses now, because you're right. You don't want to buy a book for one piece and then, use it with one student or whatever. So I think that's a really good option. And I also really like what you said about enhancing the brick and mortar, because I'm one of those girls who wants to go in and flip through all the pages. So having that available on the website is really helpful.
It's very nice. And then the enhancement there, because I was also that girl who loved to go to the music store and just sort of flip through everything. And I like touching things. I need that like tactile experience. But you also, I would stand for hours in the music store playing through things in my head while looking at the music. So the nice thing is on our website, you can both look at the music and listen to it at the same time. So you do have that option.
Yeah, that's a really good option. I like it. So much of what's on Piano Pronto are actually your compositions. So I would love to hear a little bit about your journey to becoming a composer.
Yeah. Okay. So it was kind of a long road. And I wrote here in my notes that I became a composer by accident and necessity. So I'll take the necessity part first. After my junior year of college, long story short, I ended up in Stockholm, Sweden for a year. And I was teaching at an international preschool. And the principal allowed me to start a piano program for these kids. And none of us spoke the same language. We had all of these challenges, and I didn't have access to any of my teaching materials there. And so out of necessity, I bought a copy of Sibelius notation software and I started writing for these kids. So I needed to create materials. And that's really where Piano Pronto started. From there, I've always been a stronger arranger than a composer. My natural bent is towards arranging. That is where my strengths are. But as I came back to the States after I was in Sweden and I was working with my own students again, I found myself getting really tired of teaching the same Taylor Swift songs over and over and over again. And I thought, okay, well, we can take these same ideas and I'll just write a different melody over the top. And that's sort of how I fell into writing my own compositions. I really wanted to create what I call pedagogical pop music. And I think that this is a genre that is incredibly popular with teachers and with students. There is still a group of teachers out there, and, that's fine, who are traditionalists. I'll just say they're traditionalists and, see pop music as sort of, how shall I say it nicely, shallow, maybe not having a lot of meat on the bones. Let's just say that. So I wanted to create pieces that sounded like pop music and had all of the typical elements, syncopation, easy chord progressions, things like that, but also infuse more like pianistic things in there. So pedagogical pop is kind of what I fell into, and that's what I do for the majority of my songbooks.
Okay, so if teachers want to find this pedagogical pop, is it supplemental books or is that throughout the method books that you've created? Maybe I'm jumping ahead here a little bit, but
they're pretty separate. So I would say for the most part, all of my songbooks fall into the pedagogical pop sort of genre. My Spotlight Solos series, that was one of the first set of books that I wrote, definitely fall under that category. I have a songbook that's a little bit more advanced called Dreamweaver, which is really I wrote it for all my teenage girls who just wanted to play flowy, pretty stuff like River Flows in You and all of those, favorites of the students. And so I wrote very much in that vein, but for them. And then I sort of, squoze all the good stuff, the good teachable stuff into these pieces. So you'll find most of that in my supplemental songbooks, pretty much all of the newer sheet music that I've written over the last few years. Definitely Piano Pronto method that we'll talk about later is definitely more in the traditional style, more just focused on the folk melodies, classical melodies, and those sorts of genres.
Okay, got it. Yeah, we'll get to the method books, but I do have a couple more questions about composing. As I told you, at Top Music right now, we're kind of finishing up a series on songwriting and pop playing, and we're about to start a series on teaching beginners. So I thought you would be the perfect person to bridge this gap because you do a lot of both. So let's talk a little bit about composing and how we can encourage our students to compose. What advice do you have for teachers who want to encourage more composing for their students?
Yeah, so I actually have quite a bit to say about. So strap in. I have some general tips for teachers because I think this area can be very daunting for teachers, especially if they don't consider themselves really to be composers. They kind of don't know where to start. But teaching composition within the traditional lesson scenario, it's a great bonding experience that you can have with your students. That's first and foremost what I found over the years. I want teachers to always just keep it fun and to keep it flexible. All right. You do not need to be on any sort of strict path like you are with method books or traditional repertoire, anything like that. Just kind of go with the flow. Third, you should archive everything because students, they usually are not very good about saving things. But if you save things for them, they find that it's really fun to go back and look at where they came from and sort of see the progression of their writing. Fourth, you need to give it a stage. So I've always encouraged teachers that when they have students who are writing, they need to play for their peers. And this is a good thing because they can test out their pieces in front of other people. They can get feedback. This is also great because one of the things I stress with teaching composition is like proper notation. That's a huge part of the whole game. So when I say give it a stage, it's not only to play your compositions for other people, but it's to show your sheet music to other people to have them play, because you need to first and foremost need to make sure that the music is playable by somebody else, obviously. So in terms of like why we should compose and where to start with students, I think composition is great for students who hate to do written theory work. And I'm sure a lot of you out there are nodding, yes, I cannot get my students to fill out their little worksheets in their books. So I think of composition, it's kind of like sneaking spinach into the smoothie. Like you don't really know it's there, but it's there. Because I will be honest that theory work never really changed my life in terms of being a musician. That's controversial, but I think that it's true. Being able to write second inversion, dominant seventh chords didn't make me a better pianist. It just didn't. And for a lot of students, that kind of busy work is just that. It's busy work, and they don't find that it's yielding anything at the end. But if you start to sprinkle in theory work amongst functional skills, like I'm going to talk about with composition activities, they will often find that very worthy of their time because they're getting something tangible at the end of it. So we want to talk about stepping stone activities. And students will need a basic set of skills. I would say they need basic reading abilities. They need, to be able to recognize basic rhythms. These activities are good for students who are like late beginners, and you don't want to throw a blank page in front of them because I bet you could throw a blank page in front of 50% of teachers and it would scare them too. It used to scare me. It's hard to know where to start. So one of the easiest things you can do with late beginners is to just start having them arrange. So when I say arrange, it doesn't have to be anything complicated. You can take a piece that they're working on and have them add an ending, have them add a repeat of a section, have them move something up an octave, have them move something down an octave, and work with them to like maybe make some sort of rough notation of what their arrangement is. Okay, so that's a very basic thing that students can do early on. And then with more advanced students, of course, you can have them arrange by, let's say they have a pop tune that they've played, and maybe it's a little bit too easy for them. You can have them learn how to amplify and to make that piece more complicated. Maybe you want to make the bass rhythms a little bit more, groovy instead of just, like blocked fifths in the bottom. You want to maybe have like a running bass line, something like that. Or you can have students work on arranging something downward. Let's say they bought a piece of pop sheet music and it's too hard for them. How often does that happen? That happens pretty often, especially when students, purchase like a stock sheet music version that isn't already arranged. And they bring it in and they say, here, I want to play this. And you're like, yeah, we can play that maybe 3 years from now. Well, have them work with them to arrange it down. And that in and of itself is a good composition activity. Another activity you can do with them is transposition. So even just working with a student, taking a piece that they're working on, it can be something as simple as, what they're working on in their method book. Have them transpose it. Talk about being able to sprinkle in theory talk without making them fill out worksheets. Transposition is a great way to go. And again, you can sort of layer that on top of arranging. They maybe want to arrange a piece. Maybe they want to repeat a section, show them how to bump it up a step, which is so popular in pop music, and have them transpose their own piece. And again, this gets back to being able to write things down. If you're using notation software, showing them how to do that, hopefully not by just hitting the transpose button and letting the software do it. Another easy thing is like working with lead sheets. That's another way to get kids into composing. So maybe they have a piece that they're learning, you teach them how to write a lead sheet for it. And then maybe once they've got that chord structure written down, you work with them improvising over the top of that chord structure. You layer on top of that, the next step would be taking that chord progression and having them write down their own melody. Okay, so again, these are all really like guided and sort of easy things that you can do with existing materials so that you don't have to start with that blank page. And then finally, I have here transcription. That's another thing. And I'm really into this lately with my own like arranging activities. I love looking at really complicated guitar tabs and like transcribing guitar solos of alternative rock music down onto the piano. I love that. That's like my thing right now. So, that could be something too. It's melodic dictation. So if a student, let's say they hear something on YouTube, this happens all the time too, and there isn't any official sheet music for it. I often had students that I would just, spend time with them working on transcribing what they're hearing, writing melodies down. Now, obviously, this is going to be with students who have, a stronger skill set to begin with. But again, it's scalable. It's all scalable. And these are all easy things you can do. And it's got guardrails on it.
Okay, that was gold. I'm going to have to go back and listen to all of that because you gave us so many practical ideas. Thank you, Jennifer. I'm curious if you know of some resources or if Piano Pronto has some resources available to help with some of this process of not just putting a blank page in front of the students.
Well, what do you know? I do have resources. Imagine that. So I'll say right off the bat, you can find these resources on our website under the method books tab, and down at the bottom there's a subcategory that says workbooks. Okay, so method books / workbooks. So the first thing we have is a little book called Composition Corner. And I wrote this for beginners. All of these items, they have very cheap studio licenses. These are things that I wrote a long time ago. They're nothing that I ever put into hard copy. They're just sort of resources I wanted to create for teachers. So they're very inexpensive. So Composition Corner is for beginners, and it is really focused on proper handwriting and really just teaching beginners how to draw correctly on the staff, make notes correctly. So it's going to sort of give them that foundation. So in terms of it being a little theory-ish, it's theory-ish, but they still get some very basic activities, templated activities. So where I will show them a bunch of little blocks of, 2 and 3 note patterns, and then they copy it over onto blank staff, and that's how they create their melody. So again, they don't have to create it from scratch. They're basically just sort of picking and choosing, and it's sort of a discovery process. So that's Composition Corner for beginners. Then a step up from that, I have a little book called Write That Down. It kind of goes along with my whole, you got to archive everything. I'm really bad about not even doing that, like with my own ideas. Cause I have my best ideas either when I'm like in the shower or, working out or whatever.
Yeah, the middle of the night, right?
Yes. And then I don't write it down. Yes. I've written many a melody like in my sleep, and I'm like, oh, I'll totally remember that. And then I wake up and I'm like, I don't remember that. So Write That Down, I would say, is for like late beginners and up. It's very scalable, and it is a songwriting resource book where basically I talk about, how to write a decent melody, different bass line patterns that you can use. And then there are activities for each one of these discussions. This book has a lot of those templated activities, but it's a little bit more advanced in that I give you like blocks of rhythmic patterns and then tell you write a melody and just, sort of pick from these templated patterns. And they can make short pieces. And then I encourage teachers to sort of use that as a launching point. They can create their own templates, or they can help students expand a piece. So maybe they had like a really good sort of basic idea that they created using these exercises, and then you can work with them to create, more sections and to lengthen the piece. Write That Down. This little book is good for groups as well. I've always said that, I think that teaching composition, it's great for teachers because it's sort of a niche thing. And I've always sort of seen it as, an alternate revenue stream that teachers could really capitalize on. Certainly, using a book like this, you could do it with groups or you could do it with individuals. I like the group scenario because, again, you get the bonding experience between the students as well, and they can sort of bounce ideas off of each other. We have 2 free composition books. They're just books of like various size staff paper. So there's one for beginners that has really large staves so that they can, practice drawing. Those are totally free. There's a more advanced one that has, just more staff paper. And then also in this section, we have transposition worksheets. I made a few of those last year, and lead sheets with prompts. So again, with the lead sheets, what I did is I took melodies of mine that I've written and I turned it into a lead sheet. And then there's a little text section at the beginning of the piece that shows in bass clef notation what the chord symbols are, so that they can start to make that connection and sort of start seeing, how you have like voice leading and smoothly so that you're not, jumping around all over the place with the chords. So that is our set of resources that we've got. I'm always, trying to expand. The problem is there's only one of me and so many hours in the day.
Yes, you're a creative. You have 1,000 ideas, don't you?
Yes, that's the problem.
Yeah, I understand. Yes. Is there anything else you want to share about composing before we move on and talk a little about your method book series?
Yeah. So maybe the most important thing, I think teachers have often asked me, like, how do I squeeze this into lesson time? And that really is the toughest part, because time is your biggest enemy, especially in the scenario of the 30-minute lesson. I remember always feeling like, you hit minute 25 and you're like, whoa, I would really like to have done, X, Y, and Z, and we didn't even get close to it. So that's tough. If teachers can figure out a way to, sort of get parents on board with like maybe one lesson a month, we're just going to do this because I see this benefit for your child learning how to compose and learning these skills. It will help them be a better pianist down the road. So that's something I would do if I were still teaching. Also, with your students who are sort of like non-practicers or the types who you really have to like nudge them hard to get them to work on anything, often composition will be something that they're really fired up about. I had a student who was very talented, but he just refused to read music. I couldn't get him to read anything. And finally, I just discovered he really wanted to transcribe stuff. He wanted to write stuff. And, this is what I told his parents. I said, if you want him to keep playing the piano, and I think he wants to keep playing the piano, we have to take a different direction. And so they were totally on board with that. And we ran with that. And honestly, it was probably some of the most fun I had as a teacher because it was super creative and every week was a little bit different. And it really changed his mindset about the lesson experience. So I encourage teachers to be as flexible as they can be and, sort of let your students take the wheel. But also, if they're just not into it, don't make them do it. Not everyone has to compose. There are some students who really like theory books and they just want to do their worksheets and they want to play their method book songs and they want to play their supplemental songs and they are totally fine with that. So I say try some of those stepping stone activities, but if they don't have any interest in it, just leave it alone. It's okay. Just like we all don't have to play the piano forever and ever, they don't have to compose if they don't want to. So I think it's important, even if you're super passionate about it and you think you're the best composition teacher on the planet, if they don't want to do it, they don't want to do it. And so what? Just let it go.
Yeah, I think that's really good advice. I'm curious if you differentiate between improvisation and composition. Do you have students improvise separately than composing, or are those kind of the same in your mind?
I feel like they're sort of intertwined because I feel like everything, but this is also probably just part of my personal process that everything that I've written, I think pretty much has just come from sitting down and noodling.
Sure.
On the piano. So I would say I just see them as being intertwined. With some students, though, you're always going to have the kids who only want to improvise and just sit there and make stuff up and never write it down. So, that's your line to toe as a teacher. We got to say, okay, well, this is really nice, but let's go back and, maybe we should write this down so you don't forget it. So yeah, those decisions have to be made just, I think, on a student to student basis.
Yeah. And I think maybe recording can be really helpful with that, recording their improvisations so that they can write them down later when they
Yes.
capture something.
That's very smart.
Let's talk a little about your Piano Pronto method books. It was only recently that I came to know about these, and I'm so glad that I was introduced to them. And I think I was in a Facebook group of teachers, piano teachers, and I asked for recommendations for an older beginner student who knew some music, but not piano specifically. And several people mentioned the Piano Pronto books. So I did a little research and I'm glad that I found them. On the front of the book that I got, it says, accelerated learning, all ages and all stages, which I thought was interesting. It seems pretty broad. Can you tell us who specifically you wrote the books for?
Everyone.
Everyone.
That's why it's broad. Yes, that tagline is not an accident. That's probably something that came to me in a dream. I'm pretty sure. Okay, so the books, again, they originate from when I was in Sweden writing for the little kids, and I mean these were 3 to 5 year olds. So that's where it started. But where it ended up going is when I came back to the States, I didn't have any students. So my mom, who has always wanted to play the piano, she says, I want you to teach me. So most of the method was actually kind of written with her in mind. So that's why I think a lot of teachers say, oh, this series is really good for adults. So it's probably not an accident, because my mom would often veto song choices that I would make. Because she'd say, no, I don't like that. You should take that one out of this book and whatnot. She was probably my toughest student ever.
I believe it.
Yeah, you can only imagine. But I road tested all of the material in the books on lots and lots and lots of students over, let's see, it probably took me 5 to 6 years to write the complete series. And it started way back in 2000 when I was in Sweden, but I didn't actually publish the method until 2006, I believe, was like the first iteration. So I had been building my studio back up, and I was just writing things. I didn't really have like a method in mind. I was just testing materials on students. So the accelerated learning part, one of my pet peeves as a teacher was always that I felt that many of the method books that get used, that they just move too slowly in the beginning, because I am a child of John Thompson and Sham era. Yeah, and I loved those books because everything sounded good. And I realized that those methods had their own issues, but they had a different pacing to them. And then we hit like the mid 80s, and all of a sudden everything just slowed down, like really, really slowed down. And so I sort of wanted to bring back that sense of like, let's move things along. Because one of the things that I found in terms of student retention in my studio is that you have a very short period of time when you first get a beginner. I will say like the first 3 months of lessons, you need to get them sounding like something. And I always felt that a lot of the method books, they just spent so much time playing off step and then playing just single line things. And there was no sort of like meat to it. So with Piano Pronto, I really wanted to get students playing things that sounded big right away and moved along and sort of got them past those initial stages so that we could, really get them sounding like something. And I have always told students that, the idea with method books is to sort of give you that base set of skills. It's sort of a get in and get out approach. We'll let it take you as long as, you're happy, but then we're going to go a different direction. So the irony of it is, I think when I was teaching, I only had a handful of students who actually progressed through the entire method and like did every song in the method. Typically, they would hit like the 4th or 5th book, and you could sort of see that, like, they were getting older, their tastes in music were changing. And so it was time to go a different direction. So accelerated learning, because I want to get students sounding like something right away, because that keeps them motivated. It makes them want to go home and practice because they are making big noise at the piano.
Yeah. And there's also a lot of familiar songs in there, which I think kids, they like. They want to play something that they recognize.
Yes. And that way they know that they're practicing correctly because, yes. And that's a big thing, because let's face it, if we spend 30 to 45 minutes with a student a week, they've got a lot of hours on their own that they're doing stuff. And probably, the most difficult part of teaching is just teaching kids how to practice effectively.
I also really appreciate the simplicity of the layout in the books. Some of the method books, there's so much going on the page. I feel like I have to study it ahead of time to figure out what are all these different pictures and graphics and these instructions up here, and then the tiny instructions down here. And so I appreciate that about Piano Pronto is it's simple. And I think that you don't get distracted by all these other things on the page. Was that intentional?
Yes, because, number one, adults don't need, cutesy graphics. I have always said the minute you put a graphic in a book, it's outdated. You're done. And then younger students, they like the books because they feel like it's more grown up. It's it's the material, it flows, and it's there. So a couple of things for people who aren't familiar with the core Piano Pronto method. Some of the things that are unique to the method, we do staff reading from day one. Okay, so no off-staff reading. The materials in terms of song selections are pretty neutral. And most importantly, the trajectory of the books is pretty gentle. I like to say there's a gentle trajectory. I did this on purpose because I have always felt that most methods, they tend to just go upwards. Like, you are introduced to a skill, you play one song that has that skill in it, and then boom, we're on to the next thing. So I really try to sort of build in hills and valleys in the method. So sometimes you'll find that a piece kind of goes backwards in terms of difficulty level. But that's on purpose because you often just need to remind students that they're getting better. And if you sneak something that's a little easier in there, they sort of get that, burst of self-confidence that, wow, yeah, I really know my stuff. And it's good to not always have students facing a new challenge. Sometimes they just need to be for a while. And then again, on this line of gentle trajectory, if there's a song that you don't like, you can skip it. It's okay. My feelings will not be hurt. And it's not like that skill is not going to be reviewed later down the line. So I made sure if it's something super, super important that you're going to revisit it. So even if you don't like the song that skill is attached to, that's okay. You're going to run into it again. So clean and clear layout. I think we already covered that. And then the familiar tunes thing so that they know what they're doing when they go home to practice. When I originally wrote the books, I sort of wanted an all-in-one style book that had the theory incorporated or just enough theory, because I had a lot of students who did not want to do written theory. So I just put in enough, and basically, it's easy things, and there will be little sections that ask questions about the next piece. So it sort of gets them in that groove of doing that initial analysis of a piece, just looking it over, scanning it over, answering, a question about it. And then before each piece, there's usually what's called a pronto prep section. And this was my way, again, sneaking the spinach into the smoothie, of gently showing kids how to practice effectively by doing section work. So in the pronto prep sections, what I've done is I take the difficult portions of the piece and I toss them over onto another page. And teachers can use these in a variety of ways. They can have students learn those sections first before they even tackle the piece. They can do it concurrently. They can ignore them altogether. Again, you won't hurt my feelings. But I am just trying to hammer home to students that you have to take things apart. You can't always just attack from measure one and play through, because it's not just going to magically all fall under your fingers. Sometimes you have to do that section work. Final thing that I think is nice and unique about the series are my teacher duet parts. I'm very proud of them. They're very contemporary. Teachers enjoy playing them because they are pretty and they make the students sound really good. Adults really like that from the beginning when they're playing, smaller pieces, to have this big sound. Again, that's a nice bonding activity that you can have with students. Collaborative work is, of course, so important because there's so much that students can pick up just from playing duets with you. You don't have to verbalize anything. They will pick things up the way that your hands are at the piano, your hand shape, the way you move your hands, the way you rotate your wrists. They will, sort of just subconsciously start to get all of that stuff in their head and see what they will eventually be doing as they advance. So the teacher duets are also a really nice feature, and I have those for the first 5 levels of the books.
Yeah, I think I might have told you before we started recording, my background is as an accompanist. And one of the things that I've learned is that the more musically I play, the more musically my partner will play, and vice versa. Sometimes I'm just kind of playing along and all of a sudden my partner starts playing something really musically and it draws me in and it affects me. So
yeah, absolutely. And I think with students who struggle with rhythmic issues, that playing duets is one of the easiest ways to sort of gently go over rhythms over and over again, because you've got like the aural payoff of it sounding really good, so you don't mind doing it over and over again. And it's often it's easier to not have to verbalize all these things to students, because we talk enough in lessons. Sometimes it's nice to just shut up and play.
I'm curious, have you gotten any pushback from teachers about starting the staff reading right from lesson one? Or do teachers typically like that?
I'm sure I have. I'm sure I didn't pay attention. And again, you're not gonna hurt my feelings. I have a way that I liked doing things, and if it works for you, that's great. If it doesn't work for you, again, you're not going to hurt my feelings. I feel strongly about the way that the method is written, and works for some, doesn't work for others. Ironically, our road trip series, which is for younger kids, which is for like the 3 to 6 crowd, is a single staff notation. And those songs can actually be learned by note, by rote, or by finger number. They're super flexible, and it's a multi-key approach, because this is an area, I think the only area that I've gotten pushback on the Pronto method is, again, it is more traditional in that it's a C position based, not middle C. I don't like thumbs on the same key. I never liked that. So we are more position based in the beginning. But with my other books that I've written, the Road Trip series, and then also Fired Up, which we'll talk about in a bit, those are both multi-key approaches, because that is something that has become very important and has become more important to me over the years as well. So with Road Trip, since they can learn these pieces by note, rote, or number, we have students all over the keyboard. Up, down, black keys, white keys, using both hands, but with a notation style that's flexible enough that teachers can do what works for the student. And the songs are very simple and very pattern based.
So, full disclosure, I have not looked at the Road Trip and the Fired Up method books. I would love for you to tell me and our listeners more about those and how those are different than Piano Pronto.
Yeah. So, Road Trip, as I said, is a multi-key approach, and it's for very young students. Think your preschool crowd, or it can be for, the 5, 6, 7-year-olds who maybe need something a little bit simpler. Maybe their fine motor skills are not as developed. The Pronto method certainly requires a little bit more in terms of fine motor skills. I'll say that. So Road Trip is a series that I wrote with my very good friend, Chris Spiletsky, who's the creator of Kitty Keys. We wrote Road Trip because we wanted to write a series where the student was the center of the story. Instead of it being a story about somebody else and all their friends and their dancing frogs and whoever else is, in the picture, we wanted the student to be at the center of the story. So we have 4 road trip books: Outdoor Adventure, To the Lake, To the Farm, and Country Carnival. And when we originally wrote the series, we also wanted it to be sort of choose your own adventure style, so that you could go in any order with the books. Kind of didn't shake out that way. We do have an order we like to follow in terms of progression. But, kids who get into Road Trip, they really get into it, because all of the prompts in the books sort of, are about the student, and the songs are super fun. Chris writes great lyrics. We have really fun play along tracks with a vocalist, and it's a fun series. The teacher lesson plans are in the teacher guide books, so we kept the books super uncluttered, which is really nice for these young kids. So all they've got is their song, and then they've got a page which maybe has some very, very light theory work. And I'm talking like, tracing a quarter note or something, or a coloring activity or something like that. So all of the meat of Road Trip, including the teacher duets, are in the teacher guidebooks. They're very comprehensive. We basically walk you through how you teach an entire lesson for each song. Again, you can take and leave whatever you like. You're not going to hurt our feelings. So that is Road Trip. Super, super fun. Like I said, kids who get into it, they really get into it. We have teachers who will contact us and say, I can't get my kids to want to move on to traditional method materials. They want, more road trip. So we did write a couple harder books. We have Road Trip Space Odyssey, which is super fun. It has the teacher duets right in the book. So it's sort of just an all-inclusive thing. And then we also have Road Trip Christmas Vacation, which just came out in 2020, which is a really fun spin for holiday times when you have students who don't really want to play Christmas music. So it's like holiday themed things, about gingerbread men and, our frosty friend and things like that. And so that music is super fun as well.
And then tell me about Fired Up.
Okay, so Fired Up came out just in 2018, so it's pretty new. And there's only 2 books in the series, and there's not going to be a third, no matter how many times teachers ask me, when is there going to be a Fired Up 3? The answer is no, it's not coming. I'm sorry. I really wanted to create just a set of 2 basic foundation books for older beginners who come in and don't want to play little folk tunes and little classical tunes, that want to get to playing pop music right away. So the music in the Fired Up series, there's no arrangements. It's all original music that I wrote in my pedagogical pop side of things. But still, I focused on writing, strong and memorable melodies so that students could practice confidently at home. There's no positions in Fired Up, so it's a multi-key focus. So it really helps students sort of stave off the, getting stuck with the number 2 finger is the D finger, and how many times have we heard that? So in terms of learning how to read, Fired Up focuses on directional reading, interval recognition. Those play a big role. And the pacing is accelerated and definitely geared towards like the 10 plus crowd. There's lots of minor key songs in the books because students love that. Pedaling is introduced very early because I'm assuming, since these are older players, that their feet can hit the floor. And so we can start doing that because pedal is awesome and students love it. It is a very play-based method in that the theory is integrated, but there's no written work. So Fired Up really focuses again on that initial scan of the piece and then taking out sections, learning sections. And in the level 2 book of Fired Up, we get into like very basic analysis of chord progressions. So my idea here was that you would finish Fired Up 2 and you wouldn't email Jennifer and say, well, what am I supposed to do now? Because it was supposed to be very clear that you're done with method books now. Yay. And you can move on and follow their tastes, because Fired Up has a variety of like styles. There's lyrical stuff, there's jazzy stuff, there's some classical sounding stuff. And the idea is that you as a teacher sort of figure out like which songs was this particular student drawn towards. Because often you can tell students, or you can ask them, well, what do you want to play? Oh, I don't know what I want to play. But at least if you have some idea like which pieces they really excel at and enjoy, you can sort of steer them and guide them that direction. So that was the idea, that they finish Fired Up level 2, and then ta-da, they are ready for the real world. And let's go find some books or some sheet music that you'll enjoy playing. Hey, you want to try some composition activities? You've got a good foundation at the end of Fired Up level 2 to sort of, run with it and take things wherever you want them to go.
Well, I definitely want to check out both of those. Those sound really interesting, and especially for a certain particular type of student, I think those would be great. So I'm going to look into those. Do you have any final advice for teachers who are teaching beginners? I know that that's a really broad question, but since that's our topic coming up, I would love to hear what advice you would give teachers of beginners.
I think the biggest challenge, especially now, is short attention spans of students. And this goes back to my theory that it's very important to get students sounding like something right away. Because if you can capture them in that first 3 months of lessons, you're pretty much golden. But if you have them, just sort of tinkering around with stuff that's kind of boring, you're going to have an uphill battle. So I think, we're battling, short attention spans, sort of that. I think everyone is in this mode of like instant gratification. They want everything for nothing. And that's tough, but that's something that teachers have dealt with, for eons. It's not necessarily, unique to today. So I also tell teachers to, look at method material for beginners, use it as long as it's serving a purpose, and then get out of it, get in and get out, take what you need from it. And then you have to be flexible as a teacher, even with beginners. You have to be flexible to the needs and the tastes of students. If they come to you and they're like, I really just want to play Taylor Swift. Okay, that's okay. Like, we can do that. I'm going to make you a deal. You gotta spend, let's spend 6 months. I need to give you a foundation. You can't build the house on top of nothing. So we're going to give you the foundation. And I promise you, Taylor is waiting for you. She's just right around the corner. And, we will get there. And, if you can find creative ways as a teacher to sort of sprinkle that in early on, they will love you forever. They just want to be listened to. I think that's what it comes down to. It's so much not about what you want as a teacher. You may have your own ideas that, they really should be doing this, and that. But if it doesn't make them happy, that's not going to really make you happy as a teacher either. Like, you want that symbiotic relationship.
Well, Jennifer, I am so glad that I was introduced to Piano Pronto, and I've had fun looking through your website and all the other resources you have available. And now today, it was so nice to meet you on this call. I really appreciate you taking time to share with us, and you shared so many great resources and so much wisdom with teachers. And I really appreciate your time today.
Well, thanks so much for having me. People can reach me easily via email. Yeah,
I forgot to ask.
Yeah, I figure I might as well tell people where to find me. Although I'm not on social media as much as I used to be because I'm just so busy writing. I'm a signature artist with music notes, so I'm arranging pop music. Now, it's like my dream job. All I do now is arrange pop music for them. So I have a huge catalog. I've got like 3,200 pieces right now. You can find all of that at FM sheet music, FM like the radio. My catalog is there, or you can see it on Music Notes. So I'm super busy doing that. So I'm not hanging around on Facebook very often, but I do have a Piano Pronto publishing Facebook group. There's about 4,000 teachers in there. I do check that group regularly. So if there's people with burning questions, they can get quick answers from other Piano Pronto teachers, or, usually I'm in there. Otherwise, if you just want, ask me a couple questions, you can always reach me, Jennifer, at pianopronto.com. And that's how you find me.
Great. And we'll put those links in the show notes as well. Thank you so much, Jennifer. It was so fun to chat with you and to meet you here today.
Thanks so much for having me.
I hope you enjoyed getting to know Jennifer today. She has so many great resources available, so I encourage you to spend some time exploring pianopronto.com. Like I mentioned at the top of the show, our theme for the month is teaching beginners, which is something that I love doing. So I hope you will join me here in the coming weeks as we talk about all things beginning piano. That's the end of the show for this week. I'm Rachel Ehring, and you've been listening to the Top Music Piano Podcast. I'll talk with you soon.
How do you keep up to date with all the latest trends and research into music education? How do you connect with other teachers around the world and make sure your teaching stays fresh and relevant for students of all ages and stages, both now and into the future? I created our Top Music Pro membership to be the one-stop shop for music teaching resources, training, support and community, and I'd love for you to come and join us inside. With over 40 comprehensive training courses, hundreds of teaching demonstrations and lesson plans, free monthly sheet music, discounts, and all the business and pedagogy support you could ever need, Top Music Pro is the community you've been looking for. If you're ready to level up your learning from the podcast and join thousands of other teachers in our global network, head over to topmusicpro.com today.